All those companies who talk about how AI is going to take people's jobs or do all of this, you can go to their career page and they're all hiring hundreds of people. My guess is a lot of what's actually happening is if you look at the past sort of 5 years in tech broadly, a bunch of companies that were actually just hired too many people and they've had to do layoff after layoff after layoff. What I'm seeing with AI is it's going to make people really efficient. It's great. But if a company has to run that many layoffs, it's just a poorly run company. Now, knock on wood, we've never done one, but this is why I'm maniacal on hiring. People are going to be the heart of what makes a company great.
I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. Today, I am speaking with the man behind a unicorn. Grant LaFontaine is the co-founder and CEO of Whatnot, the live shopping platform that's reshaping how people buy, sell, and connect online. Whatnot is fresh off of a $265 million Series E round from earlier this year, and the company is using that capital to mainstream live shopping. Their last valuation was around $5 billion, and today Grant explains what it really takes to scale in one of the most competitive corners of e-commerce. And as a side note, his first business was selling Pokemon cards, so this business has really been in his blood for a while now. We also talk about the impact Y Combinator had on his business, Grant's advice for co-founders, and why in a world where tech businesses are investing so heavily in AI, they should also be investing in people. This is Grant LaFontaine's Social Currency. Grant LaFontaine, welcome to Social Currency.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Whatnot is a massive company, but for those people who have never heard of Whatnot, can you describe what it is?
Whatnot's a live stream shopping platform, an online marketplace. The best way to think about it is sort of like Whatnot enables any retailer or business to create their own version of a digital shop, where you can go live, you can talk to your customers, you can engage, they can discover new things. And so we sort of think about it as a platform that's bringing in-person retail online.
You and I were talking about this earlier before we started filming, but anecdotally, I found that there is such a wide spectrum in the way that people perceive live shopping. So on one hand, there are the people who are extremely familiar with it. They know what Whatnot is, they know what the whole industry is about. But then on the other side, you have people who have no idea what it is. And when I'm talking to people, I'll say, okay, it's like a modern version of QVC. And that seems to click with them a bit more. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective, how popular is live shopping today?
Live shopping in the US and, sort of in Western markets broadly is popular, but still, not entirely mainstream. So, last year we did $3.2 billion in sales, mainly in the US. And we expect that to more than double this year. So, it's continuing to get pretty big. Now, if you were to compare that to sort of Asia, where live shopping first got big, you're talking nearly $1 trillion worth of e-commerce sales in China last year. And so where it is to where it can be, there's still a really big delta. But, what's clear from our perspective is that it's going to be very, very big.
And in the US, what are the demographics of people that are using Whatnot today?
This is one of the surprising things. Is so most people think, oh, it's a mobile app and it's this new live shopping. It must be a bunch of kids. But actually, it's like huge variance of folks. And so it really just depends on what you're into and what you're shopping. So, in women's fashion, it tends to be probably women from 25 to 35. But let's say we have a vintage jewelry category, which tends to be women 50 to 60. We have a coins category, which tends to be men 50 to 60. It really is one of these things that actually has like broad-based appeal.
I've actually read that Whatnot hosts more than 175,000 hours of live streams each week, and the viewers are engaged for an average of 80 minutes per day. That is shocking.
That's sort of how you can start to see where live shopping is going because of how much people love it. The average person is watching more than just about any other platform. I'm sure even the number of live streams now is an order of magnitude higher than that last number we put out there. But yeah, I think fundamentally it's a really fun experience. At least when I was growing up, I'd be like going to the mall, I'd hang out with my friends, I'd go and look for new things. It was just an activity, it was entertainment, and then it's fun and joyful to be able to buy something.
And the way that you said that, it makes it feel as if it's actually a social activity, where you're interacting with other people. Is that the way that you're thinking about Whatnot?
Yes. So I think this is where, some of maybe the QVC analogs are helpful, but not exactly right. And so, anytime there's a new media format, you always sort of describe it in the language of the prior media format. And it's never quite right. When I think about what Whatnot is, it's really more about bringing that in-person retail experience online. So when you go to a shop, you might be going with friends, you're looking around, you're discovering new things. It is both to purchase an item, but also an entertainment activity. Other people are there, you can talk with them. So it's this whole experience around it.
When I'm thinking of shopping in person, right? If I'm going into any retail store, I'm probably not aware of the exact styles that the store has, or even the product arrangement. Like, I'm not sure exactly what it is. And it actually seems like that's a similar element to Whatnot, where there's this interactive level where you're never really sure exactly what you're going to see on the platform. And for me, that's actually the parallel of having that element of surprise, delight, kind of like a treasure hunt in some respects. To me, that feels the most similar in my mind.
I think that's exactly spot on. If you talk to anyone who uses Whatnot regularly, what they end up purchasing is probably not what they expected. They might go, oh, you know what? I'm going to shop for some clothes. And then I'm going to go in, I'm going to look around, I'm going to browse. Oh my God, I found a great shirt at an amazing price. I have to buy it. And that's sort of the process that happens.
So will we one day be ordering our essentials like toilet paper on Whatnot, or will it still continue to be these specific categories of merchandise?
I think it's very clear that live shopping is going to work across every single category. There's always some subset of thing where being able to see it, talk to the person who is selling it or manufactured it is going to add value. So maybe you won't be buying Charmin Ultra, but there might be organic, farm to table, I don't know, a new and interesting thing, whatever that is. I think there's always a new, interesting, hard to discover thing in every product category where live and video can add value.
Okay, you heard it here first. Your farm to table goods someday on Whatnot. Okay, so we've covered the ground on what Whatnot is, but I'd love to get into a little bit more of the behind the scenes and starting Whatnot, and even your prior experience. So before founding Whatnot, I read that you had started other businesses. What were those businesses?
So my first business I started was also in social commerce. It was basically like social product recommendations, which we never quite nailed. The company ended up getting acquired by Patreon and built out the merch arm there. But I learned a lot. You dip your toe into getting comfortable building new things. And then serendipitously, sort of unplanned, both the companies ended up being in and around social commerce. And so I do think life has this way of sort of coming full circle, even if it was unintentional.
You also worked in big tech. And so did your big tech experience have any influence on you starting a company or even coming up with this idea that you wanted to work in this realm?
Absolutely, in sort of like unintentional ways. So if you look at sort of my background, my first true business was selling collectibles online. It was Pokemon cards, and I sold them on eBay and Yahoo auctions. And then first big tech job was at YouTube, so video site, and I worked there for 5 years, and I started my social commerce company, and I worked at Facebook, and I worked on sort of the Oculus App Store was the thing I was working on there. And so if you take all of those experiences, which is sort of like marketplace and video and selling things online and a social company, they all melded into what Whatnot became. I don't think it was intentional. I think there's sort of, you learn how to do these things, and if you're starting a new business, you sort of apply to some extent a lot of the prior things that you've learned, and that's sort of how Whatnot got built.
What was the aha moment, if there was one, that you had this opportunity to build something huge in this space?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in, generally speaking, there's never an aha moment. I think like the aha moment is built out of what generates a lot of press and is like a good storyline. One of my things is I like to deeply understand why things work and how they work. And so I've always been sort of a student of like, what are the big companies? How'd they get built? What were they initially doing? How did they get on that path? And most like, say if you look at consumer technology companies, but even like if you look at probably most great companies in the past 100 years, the starting place and the ending place is always very different. Like Sam Walton didn't know that Walmart was going to be the biggest company in the world. He just started one store and he made that the best store he possibly could. And YouTube, notoriously was a video dating site. And, I can tell you that no one who was early at YouTube knew how big of a media giant that thing would be. And so, I think that the same was for us. Like when we started the business, it was me and my co-founder, Logan. We're like, we like to build things. Like that's the thing. We agreed on a set of principles for how we're going to build. And we're like, we're going to build a marketplace because we think there's something here. We don't know what that's going to look like. We had no plans to build live. And we just talked to our users, try to build a great product that we would love, that they would love. And sort of like 9 or 10 months in, we built our first live shopping product. I did the first show because we always use our products. We're the first people to go. And I'm not a particularly entertaining individual. And so I was like, but my first show, I sold $5,000 worth of goods in a live show. And we're like, wow, we don't know what this is, but this is something. So I think that's probably the closest you'd get. But even then we're like, we have no clue how big it could be. What are all the things that we're going to have to get in the way? And so I think there was, from that moment, we thought there was something there, something really special. But it probably took us another 6 to 8 months to really gain conviction around how big the thing could be.
So in your words, the aha moment is part branding and part you may be on to something, but it's not this singular moment where you're like, all right, this minute at 10 a.m., I know exactly what my future is going to look like.
Yeah, there's so many other variables. You're learning, like I tend to, view building a business as a process of learning. You're learning all of like what works, what customers like, what not to do. And so it just takes time to learn and understand those things.
I read that you and your co-founder went through Y Combinator. Do you think it had a really beneficial impact on your business? Yeah,
so we went through Y Combinator in January of 2020 through March of 2020. So just as like COVID was taking over the world, which is an interesting time. And I do think Y Combinator is actually really good for helping build, software businesses in particular. It's for like a very, very simple reason. But maybe it's 2 or 3 very, very simple reasons why it works really well. One is that businesses only have the right to exist if they create value for customers. Like the essence of a business is create value, extract a small amount of that value to pay for growing the business, pay for stakeholders, pay for employees. But the essence of a business is creating value. And so Y Combinator anchors that to your head very, very deeply. You got to talk to your customers. Their motto is build something people want. And, it's very easy to go and build a business that is actually not a thing that people want because you're like, I'm here to build a business. And this has actually, I think, been one of the core problems with many of the other live shopping platforms. They're like, Asia has $1 trillion in live shopping sales. We're going to bring live shopping here and it's going to be a big business. But people aren't asking for that. So you have to know how to create the value. So I think that there's that element. And then there's an element of just they push you to move faster and do more. And, you'll surprise yourself how much can be done if you have a little bit of pushing. So I think just some like good cultural anchors for how to build a great business, they actually like indoctrinate you in a really good and positive way.
What are the other 2 elements? You said that there were 3.
So I think it's a high amount of customer centricity, a lot of just like very, very fast moving. And then it is an incredible network of people who have done things in the past. And so I think the community around it's incredibly valuable.
I want to get back to when you were actually starting to find your footing with Whatnot. So I read that you started by building this marketplace for a very specific type of category, and that category is Funko Pop. So when I was reading about this, Grant, to be completely honest with you, I had no idea what Funko Pop was. So can you let the listeners know, first, what is Funko Pop and why did you start with that audience?
Funkos are effectively little vinyl dolls. And, you probably won't know it by the name, but if you see it, you'll sort of be like, oh yeah, I've seen one of those before because they're sort of in and around lots and lots of places. And the reason we started with Funko, so first we believed that collectibles was like an amazing category for social commerce. A lot of the reason that you buy in collectibles is not even for the objects themselves, but to like interact with people who have a similar interest to you. It's a hobby. And whenever we're building a new product or a new experience, it comes back to, the essence of a business is creating value for customers. So we're always going to look at where can we provide the most value. And we're like, we think collectibles can be one of the places where social commerce is the most valuable because it's one of the categories where people shop. They want to interact the most with each other. And the other thing is we knew we wanted to pick one thing. Because coming back to this point of value, the early Whatnot team was 4 people. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to create an extreme amount of value for a set of people and you only have 4 people on your team, and the only way to do that and do that well is to be incredibly narrowly focused. And so we're like, we want to be as narrowly focused as we can. And so we're going to pick a single collectibles category. There's some good like logic behind why we thought it would work. And we chose Funko because at that point in time, it was just like, there was a lot of momentum around it. So there was more Funkos being sold on eBay than comic books. Before we started to build, we went into probably like 10 or 15 comic book shops all around LA. And every one of those comic book shops was selling more Funkos than comics. And so we believed in collectibles, and this was a category that had an immense amount of momentum in collectibles. And so it felt like if you're going to start somewhere in collectibles, this was as good a place to start as any. Now, you never know. We were always open to being wrong. Turned out all right. So, we made a good initial bet.
And so that bet on Funko Pop, would you say that was the moment? And yet again, this may be a branding term that you say, hey, that doesn't really exist, but all founders and really anyone who's interested in building businesses has heard of the phrase product market fit. Was that moment when you realized that there was immense product market fit, or was that earlier or maybe even later?
I think the closest thing to like the aha, and again, I could go into a great number of details for why we still didn't know, and maybe I'll talk about some of those in a second. The closest was the first live stream where I sold Funko Pops, and as an unentertaining human being, in 2.5 hours sold $5,000 worth of Funko Pops, which is like, hundreds of Funko Pops. And so that's like, wow, that's amazing. That's more than I sold online in the past year, on any site. So that was probably the closest thing. Now, the things we didn't know if we would work in other categories. We didn't know when we first had the first live stream and whatnot. We just put a banner at the top of the Whatnot app, which was mostly an asynchronous marketplace at that point in time. And we're like, we don't know how many shows people will want to watch. Is it only entertaining because this is a new and novel experience? But if you're going to scale this thing, you need, I don't know, there are thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of shows probably daily on Whatnot today. And so we didn't know if that would be true. There were all those bits of things that we had to sort of prove through time if it's going to be a really large business. We knew that on an individual level, we had built an experience that we loved and other people loved. Now, could you turn that into a really large business was sort of the open question.
So was your next natural step to go into still the collectibles category, but another item in that category?
The iteration was basically we did one live show a day so Logan went next. So we did it internally first. Okay, does it work? Et cetera. And then we're like, okay, now we'll invite other sellers in. Will other sellers want to do this? Will they make enough money that it's worthwhile for them? So we invited, and our first seller who came on is this guy, Curtis, who's been working for us now for about 4 or 5 years. And then that was one live stream a day. Then we'll do 2 live streams a day. Then we'll do 3 live streams a day. Then we'll do 4 live streams a day. Then we'll do overlapping live streams. And then, so we launched that initial experience in January of 2020. And then we sort of got conviction it was going to scale nicely within Funko by around September. And then in October, we launched into our second category, which was Pokemon cards. And we started the same way. We went live, we sold Pokemon cards. Did it work? Did we like the experience? And then we went into sports cards. And then we went into comic books. And then we scaled into many other collectibles categories. Then we're like, all right, we think this product experience will be valuable in fashion. We're going to go into fashion. That evolution sort of happened over 18 to 24 months.
And it's still evolving.
All the time we're launching new categories. The way we run the company is we sort of run 3 planning cycles a year, and we always pick new things to go into. So that, the team right now is working on golf. They're working with brands now, and then vinyl records. So those are the 3 net new ones that the team in the US is focused on. We're also launching in new markets. So we just launched into Australia recently. And so there's always, we always want to make the core experience really great. Because again, it's a broken record. It's about value. And so you want to make sure you're always providing the best value, the best experience. And as we do that, we'll continue to enter new markets and try and find new people we can provide that value to.
To date, Whatnot has raised over $700 million, and your latest valuation was around $5 billion. So usually a raise of this size, a valuation of that size, comes with an implicit promise to move very quickly. Moving quickly, though, can have its own potential downsides. How do you decide where to push the gas and where to pump the brakes?
One of the most difficult, I think, questions in business is what do you focus on? When do you focus on it? And what are your guiding principles? our general guiding principle is where can we provide the most user value? And so we will accelerate the business to the extent that we believe we're providing a great user experience. People are loving the product, they're sticking around, they're coming back. And we will tap the brakes when we see some bits of that experience maybe not on par with what we want it to be, in which case we'll go and redeploy resource into some of those areas to make sure that experience is great. Now, unfortunately, there's no scientific method around it. These are really complicated systems, lots of human beings, lots of people in the equation. It's very much we talk to users regularly still, we look at the metrics regularly, we talk to the team, and we're making judgment calls pretty regularly with how much new stuff we can do, how fast we can go, against still, as we do that, making sure the user experience is really great. So, that's a guiding light, and then it's a bunch of messy judgment in the middle.
And you spoke to the internal mechanisms of whatnot and how you're constantly evaluating what's working, what's not working. I'm curious if there are any behind the scenes tools or innovations that you're particularly proud of that the users don't see.
My job, as the CEO of the company, is to make sure the company is consistently delivering great things for users and building good business. I don't do a lot of, the specific day-to-day stuff, but like my product is sort of like that. And so I spend a lot of time just sort of like constantly tuning that machine. The few systems that I think are the most valuable is, one, I still approve every single hire at Whatnot, and we have a process around approving every single hire. And, at the end of the day, as what I talked about is like, I can't do most of the work at the company. So most of the work is done by other people, and great people are the most valuable thing at the company. And great people want to work with other great people. And so there is nothing more valuable that I can do than get like great people in. And there's a bunch of like distorted incentives also around hiring. So like distorted incentives around hiring are, a lot of people don't have the macro view of the incremental cost of adding a new person in the equation. So there's more communication tax, there's more context that you have to add, time spent on those things. A lot of teams can get oriented on what do they have to do today and how that person will add value. But really, when you're hiring someone, you want to think about them working for you for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and can they continue to add value for that period of time? Because if they can't, then it's not going to be a great experience for them. It's not going to be a great experience for us. And so I think that one of the best things we've done is had like really high bar on hiring. Everything gets reviewed by me, and then like make sure even the amount of hiring we're doing is good. Are we hiring too fast? Yes, no, et cetera.
One thing I just want to flag is it's really refreshing to hear the CEO of a company of your size and scale actually talk about how critical the hiring process is, the human dynamic is. I think in media, especially as of late, there have been a ton of pretty major tech companies, I won't list names, but that have actually seemed to swing the opposite way and saying, we're doubling down on AI. In fact, some companies say they're proud of the fact that they're using AI to slash jobs. And that seems to be the opposite of what you've just highlighted and how proud you are of your team and hires.
One of the funnier things to do is all those companies who talk about how AI is going to take people's jobs or do all of this, you can go to their career page, and they're all hiring hundreds of people, even the ones that are allegedly creating AGI, like they are literally hiring hundreds and hundreds of people. And, if you talk to people who run businesses, the consistent biggest constraint is really strong people who can solve problems, particularly in fast growing businesses. I think my guess is a lot of what's actually happening is if you look at the past sort of 5 years in tech broadly, a bunch of companies that were run really poorly. They spent money on things they shouldn't have. They actually just hired too many people. It got too willy-nilly. They didn't hire too many people because like people are bad, but because you just can't, if you hire people, you have to make sure they're creating value for the business. And, they've had to do layoff after layoff after layoff. And this gives them some cloud cover. Like what I'm seeing with AI is it's going to make people really efficient. It's great. But if a company has to run that many layoffs, it's just a poorly run company. Now, knock on wood, we've never done one. But this is why I'm maniacal on hiring. I want to make sure if we hire a person, we're going to deploy them for a really long time. We know they're going to be really good. And, if you looked at arguably some of the biggest mistakes that companies have made over the past 10 years is they've overhired, they have poor processes around these things. And so I don't think anything's going to change there. People are going to be the heart of what makes a company great. I think AI only makes the best people better. And, I think there's just a reflection or reaction to maybe bad systems, poor operations over the past handful of years.
And to give our audience an idea of scale, how many employees are currently working at Whatnot?
We're just under 800 folks full time.
800?
Yep.
Wow. And you're approving every single one of those hires?
Yes.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's one of the most important decisions that, I can sort of exercise influence on, because it's not my work is not like, I don't do that much real work anymore. Like I sit in meetings and like help make decisions. And so it's the 800 people who do the work. It's not me. And so it's such a high leverage thing to do.
Speaking of other very important decisions, what keeps you up at night?
So one, I work really hard. So I generally sleep like a baby at night because I'm tired. I like to sleep 7-8 hours a night. I work a lot. And that just keeps me refreshed to run the marathon, because it is like a marathon to run. I think the things that I spend a lot of my time focused on is, one, where are we providing a bad customer experience? When a product's growing this fast, people start to use the product for things that we didn't intend. And so we have to make sure that we build the product well, we have good customer support, we have good systems around that. And so I'm always looking for where things are breaking and trying to fix them. And then I think one of the, I believe as long as we continue to provide a ton of user value and we do it fast and we do it well, we will build an amazing business. And so I am always maniacally focused on where we can execute better for customers. And so I think those are the two things that take up a lot of my time.
So we've spoken about a lot of the highlights of Whatnot and how quickly it's growing. You're expanding into international markets. Has there ever been a moment along the way where you thought that you might lose it all?
Starting businesses is kind of funny, because I think you very often have to hold diametrically opposed views in your head and sort of think that both of them are true. You sort of always have to have an inherent belief that you can solve the problem and get past the thing, because if you don't believe that, you're just never going to do it. You sort of like curl up into a ball and like, why am I doing it? And you also have to have a high level of paranoia, because you ideally want to be thinking about a lot of the problems that could happen before they happen to try and solve them. Or if they do happen, which does, like, you can't predict everything. The universe is very complex. And so if it does happen, you want to sort of act in a paranoid fashion to solve it. And so there is, many of these moments in time where I'm like, oh, crap. I think one of the tougher moments in the business was when we first started to scale it. And so, me and Logan, we'd started businesses before, but we never had like really large teams. And, building a business with like really large teams, it's challenging. And a lot of it's not intuitive. Like, human beings are the hardest part about running a business. Figuring out the product, building the right things, like, those are logical. You can problem solve those. And then you get like 50 people and you're like, that's not necessarily a logical problem. There's people got, all sorts of other, issues, et cetera. And so, I think when we first started to scale, we started to hire up a lot of the engineering team, and we, like, many good startups, sort of built things fast and not on solid foundations. And so the product was growing so fast, and so it was breaking. And then we had to hire a bunch of engineers who knew what they were doing to help us. And then we didn't have good systems around how to hire, how to set expectations, how to train people. And so we had one moment in time where, like, a bunch of our good engineers came to us and were like, this engineering team sucks. They were sort of young, maybe a little bit, immature, but that sort of threw us for a loop. Like, hey, can we do this? How are we going to do it? And the reality is, with any journey, there's always bumps. And so you just sort of have to get comfortable with isolating the problem and then getting focused on solving it. I run our engineering team today, but next week I will not be running our engineering team anymore, because I will promote someone internally for it. But we have 200 plus person engineering team. I know how to do that now. And so, yeah, I think these journeys are, bumpy. And, the way you get through the bumps is you sort of always believe in yourself, you act paranoid, and you solve the problem.
Were there any mistakes that you made, or specifically one mistake that you made when you were earlier on as a founder, that has shaped your leadership style today?
I will always be open to being incorrect, I would say. Earlier on, I probably thought I was right more often than I should have given myself credit for. And, I think some of the reasons for that is obviously like success, builds confidence. And so you get confident, you make some decisions, and then you make some bad ones, and then you sort of understand. And the other thing that I've just seen through time from, almost 6 years into running Whatnot is both there's lots of different ways to do things, and you need to always be evolving how you do things. And so like, one of the early things we really fought against doing was sort of any level of like specialization. We're like, we want small teams to own big problems end to end. And, until we were like 150 people, that was 100% the right thing to do. Like I think we didn't hire our first product manager, I think, until we were 100 plus-ish people at Whatnot. And so there'd be a lot of startups would have done that way earlier. And we're like, no, the engineers can figure out what to build. We want engineers who know how to build product and not just, write code all day. And so we did that, and it worked amazingly until it didn't work. And then you're like, okay, why didn't it work? Well, things got really complicated, and actually specialization is one of the solutions to complexity. And so you do need it. You just have to apply it really well. And so I've learned that you always just have to adapt your worldview and change and just really take into account the context of situations. And so, that sort of manifests itself in, like, I tell the company all the time, it's like, we're just going to do what works. We're going to be incredibly pragmatic. Because there's very few principles or things that are infinitely durable through time.
Whatnot has clearly gotten to the scale and the size that it is because it's been very focused on community and building the relationship with the users. Can you share a moment where user feedback surprised you and actually may have impacted the roadmap for Whatnot?
That's a funny one. So I think it's always like, it just always has, right? Yeah, and some of this comes back to, this is one of the things I will thank YC for, is they just drill within you, talk to your customers, build something people want. And so that will just always be a thing that we do. Our product team in particular, we make them talk to customers every single week. You sort of don't get that. Like if you bring to me, say, a roadmap for what you're going to build, and I go, well, have you talked to customers about this? And if the answer is no, you just don't get to build it. and then, no, it's true. I will like stop the whole review and just tell people to go and talk to customers. Like, why are we sort of here? And so there's so many examples. Even the initial live product was built because we saw our customers hacking social media and thought the product experience was wonky. Last night, this isn't a feature per se, but last night I was on my phone and I got a handful of like double notifications for sellers I follow and Whatnot. I'm like, this is odd. And so I just go into, the seller shows. It's two sellers I saw this with. It was a seller called Pull Wax and a seller called The Faded Show. And I went into chat and I go, hey, I saw you restarted your show. Did something bad happen? And they're like, oh yeah, the video went out. Oh, interesting. And so then, sort of ping the team, go, hey, team, video went out for these sellers. Let's investigate. And so I just think it's a constant.
That also speaks to the fact that you're getting notifications on your phone of sellers that you're following. I think clearly you're very engaged with the product, and even when you're technically not at the office working, you're always having a finger on the pulse of what's going on.
Yeah, I think the only way to build something great is to be really empathetic and use the product, understand the product. And it's not just me. I think we've built the whole company to try to be exactly like that. We make everyone go live, we make everyone do customer support tickets. We make everyone buy, but that's a little bit easier because we just give them money. It's nice to buy free things.
So I want to also mention the fact that you have a co-founder, and he's obviously not here today. He's not part of this conversation, but I'm curious to hear if there has ever been a time where you and Logan disagreed on something and you were really glad that you disagreed on it.
So has there ever been a time me and Logan disagreed? Yes, all of the time. Sort of the answer. We're both pretty highly opinionated people who aren't afraid to express their opinions, is what I would say. One of the things that when you go through the YC interview, they make you ask is who's the boss? And the correct answer to this question is one of you has to be the boss. Because the worst thing for any company is to have conflict without it getting resolved. Because you need, like, the worst thing a company can do, basically, particularly an early stage company, is to not do anything. Because at least if you do something and you have a reasonable human being sort of on the wheel, you're going to learn, whether that's because you were right, wrong, et cetera. And so, luckily we've sort of very early on, made clear when there is conflict, who gets to make the decision. And so now there's plenty of conflict, but at least there's sort of, here's how we're going to mediate and decide. And I think that I hadn't, before I interviewed for YC, I didn't think about that, but that is like a secret sort of sauce that will help the company succeed. And it's a funny one. But then, disagreements, me and Logan have had many disagreements on, is this product good enough to ship yet? Logan tends to be, let's ship it and we'll learn and we'll fix it. I tend to be, I want it a little bit more perfect. In all of those instances, Logan has usually been correct. It turns out that getting a product into customers' hands and learning where the real value is, what they think is wrong with it, usually, not always, but usually enables you to build the better product faster. We launched into Canada probably a little bit too early. That was one where I disagreed with Logan on it, and he would probably agree that I was correct there. I think the thing that you want to do ideally is just whoever makes the decision, whether it's right or wrong, you're just going to sort of learn when you make right decisions what worked, and when you made wrong decisions why it didn't work, and then not repeat those things.
When you say you launched into Canada too early, I'm very curious. What does that mean exactly?
We've been in Canada for a few years now, and I don't think we've ever had a year in the business where revenue didn't grow at least 100%. And so when you're growing that fast, there's just a lot of things that need fixing and require attention. And the only way to do things well is to deeply focus on them. These are hard, these are not easy problems. These are like hard, complex problems that you have to solve at pretty fast clips because the business is growing very fast. And, a business that grows 100% in a year is an entirely different business at the end of the year. And so, I think we just did it a little too early. We couldn't devote the energy required to make the product experience great. Growth sort of sputtered along for a little bit. Luckily we've got more resource now. We've been deeply investing in Canada, getting the shipping right, getting the payment processing right, getting the supply right. And so Canada's growing very fast now. But I think we probably could have not launched into it, focused on the core markets. When we had the resource to go and make Canada great, we could have made it great, and it just would have saved time and energy and been more efficient. And the most important decisions that we make are actually like, what are the top couple things we're going to work on? Because we just can't do everything.
It sounds like such a huge feat to expand into a new international market when you are a two-sided marketplace, because it's not as if you're a company that's selling a product to customers in a new country, because that would be one thing, but you're expanding on both sides. Yep. You need the sellers who have the supply, and you need the customers. So how do you think about expansion, and what do you tackle first?
So the answer with a two-sided marketplace is you have to do both. Mm-hmm. And the conundrum, of course, is like, if you don't have sellers, you're not going to get buyers. If you don't have buyers, you're not going to get sellers. And that is true. One of the human decision-making faults is everyone likes to think about ors. Should I do this or this? And most of the time, if you're stuck between an or answer, you actually just have to do both. And so, whenever we enter a new market, we're going to focus on demand, and we're going to focus on supply, and we're going to do it at the same time. And there's all sorts of specifics for how you go and you do those things. But, the sort of thing at the end of the day is you have to be able to convince yourself confidently that a buyer is going to want to shop there and a seller is going to want to sell there. And if you can't do that, you're not going to build a great experience. Now, we've launched into dozens and dozens of categories, 9 countries now. And so we're just pretty good at it. The first couple times it's harder. You're on time number 120. We wouldn't be really good at what we did if we hadn't gotten pretty good at that system.
Is there a specific trend on Whatnot that you are really excited about?
The first one that I'm really excited about is this year, the fastest growing category on Whatnot's been beauty. The core sort of value on beauty is people are getting a lot of really name brand stuff at really great prices. And, that's just an incredible value prop. People love the experience. It's a really large market, and you can sort of see how it grows for, a really long time in the future. So I'm excited about that from a business opportunity perspective, we'll say. Then in terms of trends, the best trend right now is this trend of a doll called a Labubu.
Oh yes, Labubus are everywhere.
So they're made by this company called Pop Mart. They're interesting looking dolls. I don't even know how to describe them. Just look it up. You'll probably see them everywhere. And, I think in the past, 2 months, let's say, Labubus went from virtually no sales on Whatnot to vastly surpassing Funko Pops, which is our initial category. And I just sort of like the weird corners of the internet. It's like, it's just a fun little trend. So I've sort of gotten into the Labubus.
Oh, you have Labubus yourself.
I bought some. Yeah. I buy everything on Whatnot. I'm not like really into them. I'm just into like the weirdness of them.
Yeah.
It's like this new, there's always some sort of new interesting trend. And I'm sort of like into that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have the pink one? Isn't the pink one the hot one that everyone wants?
I don't have that one.
Oh.
I just bought like, actually, I don't even know what, the thing is, I'm not so into it that I even know what the good stuff is. I sort of just like go into the shows and I'll just like buy a thing and like buy the blind boxes and see what I get.
Yeah. I personally, it's one of those things. I know that they're so popular. I don't personally get it, but I think it's just one of those things. I'm also fascinated by what other people find fascinating. And so I love the culture around it.
Yeah,
it's fun.
It's the same for me.
Is there an area of the market that you would not enter?
There's no e-commerce category I can think of that we would not enter. Even today, we have, collectibles, we have farmers, we have plants, we have vinyl record sellers, golf shops. So I think there's, any broad level e-commerce category, I think you can think of a pocket of that where it's going to provide a lot of value. I think you can even extend outside of that. So one of the most asked for things on Whatnot that we don't currently support is like services and digital goods. And so, I think at some point in the not too distant future, you'll see us in those areas as well.
I have to ask about the TikTok of it all. So as players like TikTok are getting more into live commerce, live shopping of various kinds, how do you think about Whatnot's differentiation?
So I think for us, it's just continue to be focused on the things that we're providing really great user value around. So, at a really high level, we have the best live shopping product in the United States. We have the most sales in the United States. And that is the only thing that we do. Compared to other competitors who are doing 10, 20, 30, 40 things, we are a live and social commerce marketplace. Like all we do is social commerce. So we're gonna be really, really great at that. And then you look at every market we enter, whether it's fashion, whether it's beauty, whether it's collectibles, we're maniacally focused on making each one of those things great. Do we have the best supply? Do we have great prices? Do we have great shipping? The best purchase experience, the best policies for sellers? So I think for us, it's, really sort of the inherent focus on live and social commerce. And then even within that, every category we enter, we sort of think is a different product and we make sure those things are great. And, that approach so far has done us incredibly well and is the reason we are the biggest live shopping player in the United States.
With all of the growth that Whatnot has had, is having, is an IPO in the future?
We have no plans for an IPO. I think when you're an entrepreneur and you start a business, at least I did, and I would imagine like a lot of people, sort of like the dream scenario is like ringing the bell. So yeah, look, I think one day, but we're just focused on like building a great experience for our customers and building a great business around that. And, we've been lucky enough that, I think the team and everyone's done a great job of doing that we're able to attract the capital we need to grow the business. So there isn't any urgency around it.
So last three questions. These are questions that I ask every guest. So the first one is, can you share a system that you have in place that benefits either your career or business?
So I talked about a couple of those systems earlier, sort of the hiring one, maybe the next best system that I implemented. And I copied this, if I'm going to be honest. We put our own spin on it. Is I have this meeting I run every 2 weeks. So one of the problems as the company got bigger, it was really easy for people to get distracted by the things that don't matter. Some of that's because they don't have enough context on all of the things or just, distractions happen. Or it's very easy for people to keep doing the same things that they did in the past, hoping that's going to yield the same results in the future. But coming back to this idea that the only constant sort of change, you do have to adapt. And so we put together what we call it the BBR, the biweekly business review. And basically in that meeting, I have everyone who runs every important function or critical area of the business, and we review how you're tracking against your goals. We review the top most negative user feedback that we've heard in the past 2 weeks. And we look at any of sort of the health metrics in any of the core areas of the business. And what this does is it sort of makes sure that each team is delivering against the things that they thought they were going to deliver on, isn't eroding the customer experience. And we just keep a pulse on what people are saying so we know how to fix it. The slides we go through, it's probably 130, 140 slides, sort of top to bottom view of the business. but it drives an incredible amount of focus and accountability. And, the sort of the second we implemented that, the business just started to operate better. Now, I wouldn't do that as a 10-person company. I wouldn't do that as a 20-person company. I probably wouldn't even do it as a 100-person company. You get to 200, 300, you start to run into how do you keep everyone on the same page? How do you drive alignment? How do you drive focus? How do you drive accountability? And how do you keep a pulse on all the things that matter? So that's probably, beyond sort of hiring and some of the data infrastructure, that's maybe the third most important thing that we do to run the company.
So my next question comes from the social currency corner, where I get your input on a trend or news story that's impacting business and culture. So in April, news broke about the OpenAI and Shopify integration. So as AI becomes increasingly more ingrained in consumer shopping behavior, what are the impacts of this on the live shopping space?
So, I think the good thing for the live shopping space is, it's fundamentally about entertainment. And so when you look at a lot of, say, like OpenAI integrates into Shopify, it's a little bit like efficiency shopping. Like I want to get the best thing as fast as I can. And so, that doesn't have too many, sort of really large impacts to us. Now, it's very clear that sort of AI is going to change a lot over the next decade. It's going to provide a lot of efficiency. It's going to provide a lot of ability to create amazing content, all sorts of things. And so, even for live, there's going to be a lot in our business. There's going to be a lot of stuff where it's going to be impactful. A lot of it's going to be behind the scenes, making engineering efficient, making the business efficient. One of the more fun things, from the past couple of weeks is a couple folks from our team went to China recently, sort of where live shopping is really big, and they were sort of going around to the big companies and seeing what they're doing. And there you can get a live shopping host generated for you, and like the top of the line sort of like live shopping host costs $15,000 to $20,000. And at least hearing from them, they're actually like pretty widely used for like late time hours in live shopping. So, I think there's going to be some surprising applications, which could even be, AI generated host at some point into the future. But, I think for us, the nuts and bolts will be the same, which is, a lot of why people come on is to connect with other folks they like. And, AI is not going to change that. So the core value is going to be there, but maybe there'll be like amplifications. You can have some fun with the person you like as a bot at night or something like that.
I love what you said. And I think it's a really interesting point in the differences between live shopping and a typical AI integration into, something like a Shopify, where entertainment is that critical difference, or maybe even a better way to say it is that's really like the value proposition for live shopping. This is going to be entertaining, as we talked about earlier. It's social. It's almost like a different use case of what a consumer is looking for when they're looking to make a purchase decision.
Yeah, it is entirely different. So it's not, people aren't coming to Whatnot going like, I want the best coffee maker under $30. They're coming because they just want to see new and interesting things, talk with people. And so, I don't think we're, tremendously worried about, let's make sure we get deeply integrated into OpenAI. Instead, I think we're just sort of looking at it from where can we make our sellers more efficient? Where can we make our business more efficient? Where can we make the buyer experience better by sort of applying AI in certain areas?
In that sense, you're also kind of protected from everyone's always, especially in tech, wondering how is AI going to impact this business? And in that sense, it seems like Whatnot isn't really going to be all that much impacted.
Yeah, I think we're positioned really well, because at the end of the day, when you think about Whatnot, it's really the human side of commerce. People come to Whatnot to interact with other people, and the human desire to sort of talk to folks, hang out, build friendships, like that's not going to change with AI. In fact, maybe it makes it more valuable. And so I think the core value prop of Whatnot isn't going to change with AI. And instead, maybe it's some behind the scenes stuff. It's going to make our sellers' businesses more efficient. It's going to make our business more efficient. And so, for us, we think we're pretty well positioned.
All right, let's end with a question from the audience. Here is one that came in, and this is a fun one. If someone gave you $10 million today and told you to invest it in a completely different market that is unrelated to live commerce, what would you bet on?
So one, I spend almost all of my time awake thinking about Whatnot. And so I'm not sure I'm particularly equipped for this question, because I actually just, I don't pay attention to anything else that's happening. But, I would sort of evaluate two things. I do think this sort of AI wave, there's going to be a lot of very big businesses built off the back of it. Now, I couldn't tell you which ones to invest in. I actually have no idea. I just know that if you go 10 years into the future, you're going to see some pretty amazing businesses get built because of the value and change that AI is going to bring around. So something in and around there. But because I couldn't specifically tell you, I just, put it in the S&P and some bonds and, sit tight. Because I think to really win against the market, you have to be incredibly deep. You have to know all of the ins and outs of things. And I spend all of my time on whatnot, so I couldn't tell you.
A very financially responsible decision of putting your money into S&P. Grant, thank you so much for this conversation. For anyone who wants to check out Whatnot as either a consumer, seller, or just witness the business model of Whatnot, I'm going to link the handle to Whatnot in the show notes. And just as a call out to the listeners, if you are listening to this podcast, that means that you are very interested in the intersection of both business and culture. And I think to not, at the very least, check out Whatnot is to be doing yourself a major disservice, because this is truly the future of e-commerce. And not only is it just a fun activity, but there are going to be so many second order effects that are coming, and third order and whatnot. So literally and whatnot. So that's a great place to end. Grant, this has been such a great conversation. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. I've been wanting to launch this show for so long. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this and how thrilled I am that you're actually here listening. It means the world to me. If you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast, because it massively helps to support the work I do to bring the show to life. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammi Cohen Talks, and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, which is linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammi Cohen. Social Currency is produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.